Okay, good afternoon again. So, welcome to this session on human trafficking. Will somebody be introducing us, or will somebody be?
Just 2 minutes. We are just waiting for one of our speakers to come, actually.
Okay. He's not coming.
He's not coming?
No.
All right, okay. So just 2 minutes, and we'll begin.
Okay.
So this is one point I never forget to say. So even today you face the same problem, okay? And there's the issue also. The second point is whether to work on source or transit or destination. That is always, that dilemma is always there, because and you have resources restrictions and all those things. Another very important point is the challenge and dilemma together. You can put them. Continue condom distribution being used on trafficked minor girls or rescue to end child sexual exploitation. Okay. Now the point is, they are high-risk behavior. You are distributing condoms, but where are the condoms being used? On the minor trafficked girls? But generally we don't see. Okay, NACO project and this project, oh, this much condoms we have distributed, but it's been applying on whom? And we are not ready to see. I'm really sick of NGOs on those fronts. Hamara target ye hai, hamara ye wo hai, output, input, this, that. And you have basic common sense, you understand, yeah, what are you doing? But you don't want to understand. You want to be with the book only, with the report, with the PowerPoint. So that your donor is khush and you are also khush. So the point that I'm trying to say is like, because it's so difficult, because in the same red light area you have to live there, you have to work there. How can you rescue there? It's very complicated. You have to fight the criminal nexus in the red light area. And if you go for rescue, what happens is then they don't let you be there for education or any small work. So it's very complicated to decide what to do and what not to do. Okay. And so attack the traffickers or brothel keepers, first, or question the police or administration, And here, because there's a criminal nexus, and with the help of National Human Rights Commission, I convinced them, sir, let us attack the police first. At least they follow some rule and regulation. These criminals don't follow any rule regulation, okay? And we did it. And first we hit the police, We said, let the police not disturb the red light areas, What happens is when you break one chain, the entire chain gets disturbed. Howsoever organized a crime it is, and it worked. These all little things helped in creating
the... I'm just going to have to ask you to come to the end of this, because we've got one more presentation, okay. And I want to give the audience a time to participate. So.
Okay, give me 5 minutes more. Bye.
Sorry?
5 minutes. Okay. So, Anyway, so wrong segregation of victim or accused is another problem, because if what happens is, or wrong charge sheets, if you challenge these things, what happens is basically it benefits the accused. Because the moment you say the charge sheet is not good, the police investigation is not good, the trafficker goes to the higher court and he gets all the stays that is needed, and he continues his business. And pressurize, and I think I will have to rush through then. And anyway, we've identified 50, 60 more dilemmas and challenges, which all cannot be discussed. I had just 5, 7 of them, but still I couldn't manage it, And as far as the strategy goes, it's basically end-to-end, and then and here it's basically eradicating the slavery of the women, okay, and by ending their dependence on the criminal nexus. And this criminal nexus is broken by the tools of education and the charity work that we do, So therefore, Guria's strategy moves parallel and often cross-cuts. We have to support the adolescents and aged. That also has to, because all sides, we have to see that the water doesn't flow from either side, okay? And whatever rescue, counseling, legal interventions, and rehabilitation, all has to come together, right? And another thing that I want to mention about is the innovations. Innovations we have already talked, okay? So as said, we were the pioneers. We did adopted 3 children. We have lived in the village for 24 years at the Bedia village, and that was the innovation part, where you have to experiment actually, okay? And prostitution, child prostitution free red light area, the cultural group I talked about, the witness protection is another innovation that was done, and overall the innovative holistic end-to-end strategy. Thank you so much.
Ajit, thank you so much for that and for the detail. I mean, it's incredible what you're doing, and we could listen to you all afternoon, but we have got one more presentation that's going to be done by video. But this event is about asking the G20, the 20 most powerful countries in the world, with the most money, 80% of the world's economy 75% of the world's people. The money that is in the G20 countries is enormous. And these issues that we're talking about, if they were properly invested in, we could start to prevent them. We're never going to prevent this without commitment of governments, because we will always be firefighting as opposed to fire preventing. So I want to go back to what is it we are asking those 20 leaders and the additional ones that come, what is it we're asking of them? And there's people who are going to be future lawyers. What systems can come in to make it easier for the work? What about witness protection? What about victim support? What about prevention? It's always better to prevent a fire than to dispatch the fire engine. So there's a video now which is going to come by Duncan Jepson, who is a lawyer by trade, a corporate lawyer, and he will talk about the supply chains, the accountability of companies, and how not just how this happens, but how complicit they are. And he will tell it from first-hand experience as a corporate lawyer in the Asian region. So we're going to show that video now.
Good day, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to the G20 Interfaith Forum Working Group on Human Trafficking. My name is Duncan Jepson, and I am the Senior Advisor to the Santa Marta Group. Kevin Highland asked me to provide a short presentation and say a few words about our perspectives and strategies for combating human trafficking. Prior to joining the group, I was the founder and led the NGO Liberty Shared, which did a lot of work on anti-money laundering as it relates to human trafficking and on corporate accountability in supply chains. Before that, I was a solicitor and head of legal and compliance at two of the largest investment management firms across Asia Pacific. Framing the problem is essential. The International Labour Organization publishes an annual figure of the number of victims in modern slavery. Last September, they reported that just under 50 million people were in some form of modern slavery. This is an important number as it helps us understand what resources are required to provide care to victims and also to further help survivors as they reintegrate into society. But this might be a misleading figure in relation to protection of vulnerable people, and particularly in relation to the needs of criminal justice. When thinking about vulnerability, perhaps a place to start is how many people are below a poverty line. There are several poverty lines that we can use, and the World Bank provides several figures. But perhaps if we choose $6.9 a day, we can see that 3.6 billion people in 2019 were below this number. This is certainly a number that would create financial precarity and perhaps tempt people to take opportunities that are high risk. This is important when we consider the number of people that are able then to report on these high-risk situations and the amount of information that they can provide about their experiences and also the individuals and groups that are seeking to exploit them. Internet access therefore becomes key, and what we see is that only 65% of the global population are using the internet. 35% are simply not accessing it, and therefore a huge amount of information is absent and lost. Some of this is going to translate in the ability of law enforcement to actually act, and act as a deterrent, but also use criminal justice as a means of convicting and prosecuting traffickers. The State Department records the annual figures of prosecutions and convictions, and what we see over the last 7 years is that these are merely in their thousands. So we have a problem where victims are counted in the tens of millions, vulnerable people possibly in the billions, but convictions of traffickers merely in the thousands. Criminal justice and the deterrence and then the protection of vulnerable people through law enforcement lag severely behind. And we believe this is an area that must be addressed. Global supply chains are not merely complicated, they are highly complex. And this has been more fully appreciated by the general public since the pandemic. However, this complexity and argument of complexity has also lent support to the reasoning that corporations and their suppliers have given as to why they are unable to identify and address forced labor and other labor abuses in their supply chains. It is of course true that supply chains have to adapt, and there are a whole range of different pressures on global supply chains that constantly mean that they must be moved and must change. However, this is a situation that is not unique to production and commodities. If we think about the financial services industry, post 9/11 and post the war on terror, and then in relation to money laundering as it relates to drug trafficking, the financial services industry was told that it was unacceptable for them not to have the right measures in place to identify money laundering, and that it would be unacceptable to say that they simply couldn't tell because it was too complex. And these days, any financial institution that has a suspicion of an activity related to money laundering must report it immediately. This situation is very far away in production and commodities industries. However, there are some examples of law enforcement actions in relation to forced labor in commodities and production industries that are worth looking at. First is US Customs and Border Protection's efforts in relation to import bans on goods that are made wholly or partly with forced labor. This has been controversial, but at the same time, I certainly have seen it effective in relation to the palm oil industry and the fishing industry. Most recently, there have been efforts in the sugar industry in the Dominican Republic, and although there is still work to be done, what we do see is that people are taking note and work is being done to start alleviating abuse on the sugar plantations. A second line of action has been Department of Homeland Security's Homeland Security Investigations Office, which has been using criminal legal powers to investigate forced labor in supply chains. Last year, they did an investigation into forced labor in Goodyear Tire and Rubber Corporation's subsidiary in Malaysia, Goodyear Malaysia Berhad. And this led to a considerable settlement to the workers, which was considered to be intergenerational. These, however, are beginning steps, and much more needs to be done to apply criminal justice as a deterrent to global supply chains. Forced commercial sex exploitation or sex trafficking. The United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime offer a number of important trends that we should consider here. First is that traffickers are operating with greater impunity. The number of investigations and convictions is falling. And this is reflected in the numbers that the State Department presented in their TIP report. Secondly is that boys and men make up a greater number of victims. Thirdly, women and children face an increasing amount of violence. And I think most importantly here is to consider that there are more organized traffickers. Organized groups are an increasing proportion of sex trafficking perpetrators. And they are operating for longer, abusing people for longer, and using greater violence in doing so. These are extremely worrying trends. And in a sense, they show that either we are discovering more and more information about how it operates, and we are learning what we simply haven't known before, or the situation is worsening. What we call for here, of course, as we have done previously, is greater investment in law enforcement and criminal justice to act as a greater deterrent. I believe that strategies to fight modern slavery can be divided into three simple categories. First, strategies that address the human element, care and protection for victims and vulnerable, and investigation and prosecution against perpetrators. Secondly, in relation to the products and services that arise from exploitation, cessation of services and seizure of products is crucial. Finally, to identify and seize revenues and proceeds that arise from the sale of products and services. In the 2000-2010, I was heavily involved in urging the financial services community and financial institutions, particularly across Asia Pacific, to take seriously the proceeds that they were transacting arising from sex trafficking and from forced labor. This work culminated in working with the Financial Action Task Force and eventually contributing to the publication of their guidelines in 2018. At that point, it was gratifying to see financial institutions take seriously the issue of transacting proceeds of a crime relating to modern slavery. However, there are two sides to this story. The first is that we do want the financial service industry to take part in fighting modern slavery and therefore identifying proceeds. But we must also recognize that they have benefited from this, and in some cases where they provided loans and credit facilities in relation to production and manufacturing, they have of course enabled forced labor and labor abuses in particular. And that may be something they're less willing to address because it involves clients that they may have had for many years. We need to work harder with the financial services community to unravel some of these conflicts of interest and complexities in order that we have a better financial services community thinking about the victims and the vulnerable of modern slavery. Sustainable Development Goal 11 is to create resilient communities, communities that can stand up on their own and thrive, socially and economically. That will not be possible if they are constantly undermined by organized crime and poverty and the need to seek opportunities that may be high risk and lead to exploitation. When we think about those who are vulnerable, we find that there are perhaps billions of vulnerable people to those circumstances. And we also find that the protection of those individuals and those families is very limited, with arrests and convictions merely in the thousands. What we ask for today, and what is proposed by Kevin Highland, is that there is $30 billion made available by 2030, a 30 by 30 goal. This would put forward the idea that criminal justice is fundamentally important, that it is not just about arrests, convictions, it is actually about making communities resilient and helping to provide protection so that they do not require endless social security and government funding to support them, and that we can see communities stand up on their own and be able to cope resiliently with the conflicts and with the difficulties and challenges that lie ahead. I hope the discussions in the rest of the workshop go well, and thank you very much for listening.
So that's from the perspective of somebody who is looking at this from a financial background and a lawyer. But I want to turn to the floor now because we're limited in time. So I want to take 3 questions and then we will ask the panel to answer them briefly. But I think this is about, again, focusing on the G20. What is it? If you had the 20 leaders here, the most powerful people in the world and the ones that run the biggest economies, what would you be suggesting or what would you expect us to ask of them in order to start to eradicate, but to make the lives and the work of these wonderful people I'm sat with better, and to make sure that, that what they're aiming to do is actually supported and becomes fundamental to governments. So have we got a microphone? Can somebody got a question?
Thank you, sir, that you said that we would be in a position to call upon the G20 to do certain things. And that is what we have to focus on. So somebody said that the real crux is prevention and protection of children. Mm-hmm. That is by sharing awareness, sharing our knowledge. Now, this happens in 2 partnerships. One is the social partnership, consisting of parents, teachers, counselors, neighbors, and social workers. The second, if this fails, is the legal partnership, consisting of police, prosecutors, judges, lawyers, defense counsel, and criminal justice agencies. These are the 2 partnerships that work. And we must make them work, and we must make the government make them work. That is what we've got to do as an answer to your question. Now, the protection and prevention aspect, I've said twice before in 2 other forums here, yesterday and today. We have to come out with some things to be shown to children, to be shown to the counselors in the schools, the teachers in the schools, the parents who don't know. Because they know that these things are happening also. They live in denial quite often. So we take out a small booklet. This is on child sexual abuse. This is on trafficking. It is made by one of our judges, a very good judge. It is in English and in Marathi here, and we can translate it in any of the languages. It is also on the net. And here in this book, the children are growing in 3 chapters. So once they are very, very small, everything is illustrated. They ask the teacher tells what is trafficking. The second, they understand, they discuss with one another. And in the 3rd chapter, they save a child from being trafficked. So, these are the things which must be brought home to the children. In the open society, not only where you all are doing great work, because that is in certain corners. No, most of the population doesn't know about it. Coming to the second aspect, that is the criminal justice system. One thing that I can share with you is that if a brothel keeper is released on bail, and he has said, somebody said, no, how many bail applications, and you said that you have prevented some of the bail applications, everything gets over it. Bail granted means conviction gone. Yep, it happens like that. And I'm talking about the traffickers only. But traffickers are of various types. Even a transporter is a trafficker. Even a harborer is a trafficker. Because a child is brought from the parents, it is either sold by the parents, it is taken by any of these means that we saw in the picture, and then it is transported, it is kept for some time, then it is brought to the brothel or to any other thing. Even the children, the boy children are brought into labor. So these people have to be nabbed. And then the bail application must be seriously challenged. If the bail is not granted. Now, there is a judgment of Freedom Firm of 2015, which lays down the parameters and the checklist for granting bail. Okay? So that is one of the things. The second thing is that in our ITPA, there is a very good provision that the police have to go and seal the brothel. I don't know why the police are not doing that, because I used to ask questions to the police to do that. First thing is they have to go and seal the brothel. Now what happens is that brothel is his main real estate. And when that gets going, he can't have another real estate in a city like Mumbai or Pune, It takes time. Otherwise, he goes on and on. So you must see to it that that brothel gets sealed. Sealing is the provision. These are the 2 main things.
Thank you, and thank you very much for that contribution. It's very, very well put. So could I ask some short questions, because we've only got a few minutes. There's one at the back there, one gentleman at the back. Could you take the microphone, if possible?
Hello. My questions to ma'am, I think, salute to you, ma'am, because since last 12 years you are working with this field, and it's very challenging. I think I had been this Sona Kanchi in the Kolkata, the Mahila Darbar and all. So since I'm the member of the society, I want to know, when you do the repatriations of any trafficked girls or the trafficked boy, so what are the different challenges do you face while you file the HIR, means house investigation report? Because there are the certain areas that we need to focus very particularly, because if you want to rehabilitate that person in that family, there is certain the barriers that that particular person face. So how we can overcome from this problem? Because house investigation report and the repatriation, these are the 2 important things. It's very important to address the issues. So how you can give the feedback for that?
Sister, can I come to you first, because you've worked internationally? So could you address that question first?
Yeah, yes, Sister. In my experience, the repatriation find it very hard. Many a times it goes from pillar to post. And when I worked in Libya, when the people realized that they were being trafficked from Africa and brought to Libya, and they cannot continue living the state that they were in, when with given awareness, if they have to go out, we take them to the embassies of respective countries. And the ambassador or the secretaries, they have to really give an information about how they can be put back. So at that time, the IOM, International Organization for Migration, they involve with the help of the NGO. I myself have been taking many of the young women and men who wanted to go back, because when they realized it is they being trafficked and they are going to be going to have a life that is not expected, when they decided to go back, when we take them to IOM give a counseling and prepare them once again and give a certificate of traveling. It is not their passport. It is not their other documents, just a travel document. So with that travel document, IOM give a ticket to go back to their country. And in the initial stage, they were not able to do that, but in the later stage, they decided to give them a kind of financial help so that they, upon arrival, these people will be able to make a living for themselves. Instead of re-trafficking, they may stay back in the country, do a small business. So the financial help was given and kind of settling them back into their respective countries. So sometimes it happens, sometimes it is not very successful. That is my experience.
Okay. So two things. What we do is that we counsel the community. Generally what happens, all the counseling is done with the survivor. So our focus is talking to the community first, because that is from where the most stigmatization comes, the family. That is the primary thing. Second is giving them some kind of financial independence, some empowerment. Seeing their level of education, it can be, I'm talking about the Indian context, okay, like kitchen garden, maybe you can say stitching, maybe a little bit of computer, something which gives them some empowerment. And also there is something we have started which is known as survivors rehabilitation, survivors engagement. So there are survivor group leaders. So if somebody says that you are sex trafficked, they will challenge and say, yes, I am sex trafficked, so what? So we are trying to change the pattern like that, and of course we do home investigation. We try to see if the child or the girl is repatriated, whether it is a good environment for him or her, because we are against institutionalization. We do not believe in institutionalization because it's again, caging them up. So these are 3-4 things that we do.
Thank you. And Najib, very briefly, could you tell us your experience?
Restoration, when it comes to inter-countries, we've only done with Nepal. And Nepal, I think we've never had any problem. We invite the organization, they come here, we support them, they take them back, and we follow their legal cases in India. Whereas within the country, I think it is a problem, because, and here in Eastern UP where we are working, we have these vigilance committees, They are very helpful in identifying cases. At the same time, when you restore children, they give that protection, that environment of society that is needed, because generally we are stigmatizing them, we blame the girls only. So that, because of those reasons, the chances of re-trafficking is also there. So I think the civil society, the community has a very important role in terms of restoration actually, And so, and if it is not within your state, obviously you have to interact with the other NGO there and seek their help. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid we've run out of time. Thank you to my panel. I would just close up by saying there are 6 things that with the support, thankfully, of Pope Francis, with governments around the world, that we're asking for the G20 to do. And I'm hoping this will all enable you to do your job. It's not just an ask for the sake of an ask to get another commitment in writing that doesn't deliver. Number 1 of that is to ask governments to make sure their procurement is safe of trafficking. Our taxpayers' money should not end up in the hands of criminals. And that means they need to make sure that their procurement and the supply chains on their big budgets, 1 in every $5 in the world is spent by a government. The next thing is business culture. And Germany is just bringing in laws about the culpability when you breach business laws and you have trafficking in your supply chain anywhere in the world. And the UK has had legislation like that, but there's not been a sanction. The EU is going to bring in legislation, and Africa is looking at legislation. So we need that to actually make it something that companies try not to do. The next one is about tainted money. Creating this notion of tainted money, just like we have for terrorism or corruption or other serious crime, where we strip away the money and we go to lengths to take it away. So this is a crime that doesn't pay. So it's not worth doing. The next one is the internet. The internet needs to be governed by law everywhere. We wouldn't allow the behaviors on the internet to happen on our reality highways. So what we don't allow in our highways on the street shouldn't happen on the internet, and all the way that's advancing. And with AI, we need regulation. The next one is the international instruments. Getting them working, using them. Using those international instruments, knowing them. Knowing what countries have signed up to, whether it's the ILO, the UN, the UNHCR, the UN Declaration on Human Rights, knowing them and demanding of governments that they implement them properly. After that is the international institutions. I was campaigning for the International Criminal Courts to take on a case of human trafficking. They haven't had one, but they have now issued a warrant. And on that warrant is the name Vladimir Putin for trafficking children from Ukraine into Russia. There is an international warrant, the first one for trafficking, and he is the subject of it. So we need to get that raised to that level. But there are many countries, India's not one of them, that is the government is responsible for trafficking. But there are countries where it is, or where officials. So that was the fifth one. The sixth one is about the moral leadership. We cannot do any of those unless we've got proper moral leadership. And the thing that I'm so pleased with is we've got you young people in here who are the future leaders, who can make that moral leadership become normal life. Our generation, my generation, have got shame. We have got shame to own up to, that we have allowed this to become the norm. Well, you can make corrections from the mistakes we've made in our life by making sure this is something that is integrated into society, that it's just not tolerated. So it's over to you, perhaps, in the near future. So thank you very much for being here today. Thank you very much to the panelists and for all they do.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, everyone. I would now like to call upon Sanjana Bharadwaj ma'am to please give us the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Vedang. Esteemed dignitaries, Honorable Justice Roshan Dalvi ma'am, Honorable Kevin Hallen sir, Father Don Bosco sir, Shri Ajit Singh sir, Pallavi Ghosh ma'am, Shirley ma'am, esteemed dignitaries, moderators, students, on behalf of Dr. Vishwanath Karad, MIT World Peace University, I thank every one of you for being part of this session. I know the 3 sessions that we had, and the most important aspect with reference to global peace is to solve the problem of human trafficking. So in this particular session, we came to know about the problems and how as a society we can solve this problem using executive as well as legislative, and not forgetting the judicial mechanism. So this is something that we need to incorporate, and as Kevin Hallen sir just mentioned right now, it is the onus is on the youth. The onus is on you and I to ensure that this problem does not surface, this problem does not exist in the society. And for that aspect, we need to take affirmative actions. Thank you very much for being part of this session, and I hope you have a wonderful week and a great evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I would now like to request all of the dignitaries to please come together for the group photograph. And I would also like to call upon Professor A.K. Girisan sir and Justice Roshan Dalvi ma'am to please join us for the group photograph. Thank you so much, sir.